If your teen has been diagnosed with the FND or Functional Neurological Disorder, but on top of that, your child has also been diagnosed with POTS, Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia Syndrome. Maybe the doctors called it dysautonomia. Maybe you're still not sure exactly what that means, how it connects to this FND condition. What you do know is that your child now has 2 diagnoses on top of everything else, 2 sets of specialists minimum, and still no one has explained why both of these are happening at the same time or what to do about it. So today I want to show you exactly why POTS and FND often travel together mysteriously, but there's a reason for that. And what the latest research is saying about what drives both of them and what it actually means for your teen's recovery. So let's dive in. Hi, I'm Dr. Lee, and for those of you who are new here, welcome. I am a pediatric health psychologist and the founder of Teen FND Academy, a coaching program that helps teens with FND and their parents get their lives back. If you have been watching my channel for quite some time, you may have seen me touch on POTS before, and it was a bit ago. And I actually did a full case video on POTS and FND so that I will link in the description box below. So you already know that these 2 conditions often show up together, like for your child's case. And I've got a lot of teens with these conditions, and I get asked this all the time. What about POTS? Our child has an FND and also POTS and then something else. So what you may not know is what they actually have in common underneath, and that is the nervous system dysregulation. Simply put it this way. Both POTS and FND involve a nervous system that has lost its ability to regulate properly, and that is the thread connecting these 2 things. And I recently attended the FND Society conference, and one of the speakers was Dr. Thomas Kalimsky. I should have probably introduced myself, but anyway, he's a neurologist at Virginia Commonwealth University who has spent his entire career studying functional autonomic disorders, including POTS. And as I sat there listening to him, I had one of these moments. Like, I already understood the logic and neuroscience connecting POTS and FND. Here was his research with actual scientific data backing it up. And I went back to his research after the conference, and today I want to share what I found with you. So what is POTS and why does it sound so familiar? Okay, let's start there. POTS stands for Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia Syndrome. I don't know who named POTS, and then there's a POTS and PANS and PANDAS and all of the other stuff. But anyway, so in plain language, POTS is when your teen stands up, their heart rate spikes far more than it should. So they feel dizzy as a result, lightheaded, and sometimes like they're going to faint, and sometimes they do faint. They may have brain fog, fatigue, nausea, and exercise intolerance, meaning they have a hard time getting physically active. The gold standard for confirming a POTS diagnosis is the tilt table test, is what it's called. So basically your teen lies flat on the like this fancy table, and the table tilts upward to an almost standing position. And then heart rate and blood pressure are monitored at the same time. In adults, a heart rate increase of 30 beats per minute or more technically confirms the diagnosis of POTS. In adolescents, that threshold is a little bit higher, at 40 beats per minute or more within the first 10 minutes of being upright. And critically speaking, the blood pressure kind of has to stay relatively stable throughout this whole test. If the blood pressure drops significantly at the same time the heart rate goes up, that generally points to a different condition called orthostatic hypotension, not necessarily POTS per se. So technically speaking, in POTS, the heart rate is racing, but the blood pressure kind of remains similar, stable, relatively speaking. And again, this is very simplistic term, okay? So if you're arguing, oh no, there has to be this or that, like, okay, I'm just making it super simple. Here is this part that matters most for this conversation. The heart itself is structurally okay. So the test to see if there is any heart structural, like defect and structural damage, all of those tests come back normal, even though the measurement of the heart rate and blood pressure are real. So the problem is not the hardware, it is how the system is working and functioning. So if that sounds familiar, I would say it should, because it is the same framework we use to understand FND. Not a broken structure, a nervous system running a pattern it shouldn't be running. So Dr. Kalimsky describes it this way. When you run a diagnostic on a computer, everything related to the hard drive comes back fine. The problem is not necessarily the hard drive, it is the software. So again, he's saying POTS is a software problem, and we say it, FND is a software problem. And when both show up in the same team, like your child, at the same time, it is likely because the same system of the nervous system is dysregulated. The Family Guy shares a handful of practical strategies to help you get out of this survival mode, and it shows why our structured approach gets such a strong result. Grab it from the description below. It is free. Now, how has POTS traditionally been treated? Let's start there. The conventional approach focuses on, guess what? Managing symptoms from the outside in, because the problem of POTS and the symptoms of POTS are the same thing. So salt and fluid loading to increase blood volume, for example, and compression socks to prevent blood pulling in the legs. Graded exercise carefully managed to rebuild cardiovascular conditioning through physical therapy. And for some teens, medication on top of it. Let me tell you, these tools are not wrong, okay? For many families, they provide real meaningful relief. But here is the problem. They're all aimed at these peripheral symptoms, the heart rate, the blood pressure, the blood volume, while nobody's asking why the nervous system is generating these signals in the first place. And when the conventional approach is not enough, this is what happens. Most families hit a wall. So what do? More adjustments to medication, more PT, more symptom management. But the underlying system driving these symptoms stay untouched because nobody's talking about it. And this is exactly where the research by Crouch, Kimlensky, and colleagues at Virginia Commonwealth University becomes very important. They published a 2026 study in Clinical Autonomic Research, basically arguing that POTS is better understood as a central nervous system disorder, not primarily a cardiovascular disease. What that means in plain English is the persistent symptoms of POTS may be driven by a nervous system stuck in a threat response. The brain basically learned to treat the act of standing up as super dangerous, so it triggers an alarm, and that alarm keeps firing even when no real danger exists. Does that mean that you're making things up? Oh, absolutely not. Based on this framework, the team developed a treatment approach called PORT, P-O-R-T, POTS Reprocessing Therapy. I don't know how they come up with these names, but whatevs, okay? It is literally adapted from pain reprocessing therapy, also known as a PRT, which is an evidence-based approach for centralized chronic pain. And I use this approach quite a bit. The core of it is teaching the nervous system that the symptoms are not the emergency that brain thinks they are. Does it sound familiar? Because that is the same mechanism we work with in FND recovery. And this is early research, so the full trial is still underway, but the direction it is pointing is very important. And it literally lines up with what I have been seeing clinically for years and dozens, if not hundreds of cases. So why am I talking about POTS today specifically? Well, on top of the conference thing that I heard, mostly because in my work with families, having multiple diagnoses on top of FND is not the exception. It's actually the pattern. Like every single one of the teens that I have worked with has something on top of FND. And POTS is one of the most common ones I see alongside chronic pain and other overlapping conditions. And these families are not dealing with one condition that is hard to manage to begin with. They're actually dealing with 2 or 3, each being treated separately, with no one really connecting the dots between these things. And that is exactly what pulled me towards this research when I heard Dr. Kimlensky speak at the FND Society conference. And I want to tell you about a family that represents what I see regularly. Just to provide the confidentiality and protect their identity, this is a composite, like pieces of many families I have worked with. But if you're in this, you will recognize it. Okay, so their daughter, let's call her Zoe, started showing symptoms at age 13. Heart rate spikes when she stood up. She felt super dizzy, super exhausted. That didn't make any sense because she was pretty healthy. She was diagnosed with POTS, and her cardiologist prescribed medication and recommended a physical therapy program focused on exercise tolerance. Mind you, she was an athlete, and suddenly she had a hard time doing this. So for a few months, It felt like they had a handle on it. But underneath, Zoe wasn't getting better. New symptoms started showing up on top of it, like different ones, like tremors, episode where her legs would give out or feeling super weak, stretches of complete exhaustion that lasted for days, if not weeks. And then her school attendance started dropping and her world got smaller and smaller, while she was getting more appointments, more referrals, and eventually a new diagnosis of FND, Functional Neurological Disorder. Her mom described it to me this way. What started as a fire in a trash can, something that was contained, something with a name, POTS, and a treatment plan, has now turned into this whole monster of house being on fire. She felt like they were starting from zero, like everything they had learned about POTS was somehow wrong, and now they had to figure out a whole new condition on top of that. Very exhausting. The thing is though, she was not really starting from zero, but nobody has given her the framework to see both conditions were part of the same picture. The POTS treatment managed some symptoms, but the underlying nervous system was still running a threat response, and over time, that expanded into more and more symptoms. The fire spread. So when Zoe's family finally started working from a framework that addressed this nervous system as a whole, like Zoe is a whole person, things began to shift. Definitely not overnight, but in a direction that actually held towards recovery. So what does that mean practically for you? If your teen has both POTS and FND, here is the most important thing I can tell you. Chasing each diagnosis completely separately, like they're completely different entity, will likely to keep you stuck longer. Each specialist is doing their best within their lane. The cardiologist manages the POTS part, right? And the neurologist manages FND. But nobody is really working from a single framework that addresses the system underneath both conditions. That shared mechanism, this nervous system that learned to stay in a threat state and cannot find its way out, is what needs to be addressed. And that requires a whole family approach, because it's not just about teen, but you guys, right? And also not by symptom approach either. And this is exactly what I teach inside Teen FND Academy through the Brain Toolkit, which stands for Building Resilience and Improving Neurohealth. It is a framework built around helping the nervous system find safety again, all from physical, emotional, and mental state, which is a foundation both POTS and FND recovery really depend on. And medication and PT, again, are not wrong. They actually work best when the family is also working the nervous system piece. Without that, you're kind of putting out individual flames while the house keeps burning as a whole. If you want to see how my full program of Teen FND Academy works and how it's helping families resolve FND for real, then watch the video linked in the description box below. So if your teen has both diagnoses, right, or if you're watching the POTS symptoms expand into something that looks more like FND, I want you to know there is a reason that happens, and there is a framework for addressing both of them. And I put together a free family action plan that walks you through how we approach this with families inside Teen FND Academy. It is completely free, and the link is in the description box below. And if you want my help directly inside the community of Teen FND Academy, check out my website to see if you are a good fit. I'll see you in the next video.